I've been given a list of questions here from Rocking On Magazine, which I shall, I guess, translate for you. My name is Steve Harris, and how much time do we have?
30 minutes.
30 minutes? Okay, sounds good to me. Okay, so are you okay then? You all set?
Sure.
All right. This album, the latest album, is produced by Nile Rodgers, which seems to the interviewer to be a rather strange event. How'd that come about?
Are you on tape recorder?
Sure am.
Nile Rodgers is not particularly unique to himself, an indication of where production of popular music is going to be in the future. There are very few producers in this day of specialization who can handle artists ranging from Stevie Ray Vaughan to David Bowie and every character in between. I think it's only peculiar if you see us living in the age of specialization and you only listen to one particular kind of music, but I don't believe that anybody does. And I think the idea of a rock producer to produce rock for exclusively rock music fans, I think, is dangerous and a thing of the past.
How about in the past for your solo stuff? Which producers did you use?
Bob Rock. Yeah, that's it, man.
That's it. Oh, okay. But he's a classic example of a guy that does just rock and roll, right?
Yep.
And how did Nile compare with him?
It's two different worlds, man.
Maybe you could elaborate a little bit.
I think it's apples and pears. I don't think you can compare the two.
Mm-hmm. But like, what were the differences? How did?
Is this a question on your paper?
Yeah. This guy wants to know like how Nile was different from the previous.
Like I said, it's apples and pears. You can't compare the two.
I guess it took 3 years to get this record out. You said there was a 3-year hiatus, let's say, in between this one and the last one.
No, I started to make this record probably 18 months before it came out. Not very long by most standards.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 90 days total in the studio.
Mm-hmm. So pretty much average then.
Uh-huh.
Pretty much average.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the amount of time.
Yes.
Yeah. How about the total of 3 years though? Why was there that long a hiatus?
Well, I was on the road for the better part of a year. That leaves 18 months to go in and out of the studio, write your music, put it together is not unusual. What did I do with the extra 3-4 months?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember.
Okay. The interviewer notes here that there's quite a bit of sort of a classic David Lee Roth style. The title, Your Filthy Little Mouth, the names of the songs like She's My Machine. You don't think you've changed very much in the last few years?
Well, I don't know. What was your question?
Have you changed very much, do you think? People are there's a common perception that you've been away for a while. Is it the same old Dave, or do you think you've changed much?
Well, I think there's a certain perception of unidimensional losers who look for something, much as the same people who look for Jesus in an oak tree. If you look hard enough, you'll find whatever it is you're looking for. I think that people have a flat cartoon image of the world around them. Will think in terms of, ooh, there's a sexual entendre. Ooh, there's one of those double meanings I read about when I was in 3rd grade. I think there's a basic list of subjects and fascinations that has never changed with human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And one is romance, one is complaint Complaint. Another is Fascination. Your Filthy Little Mouth includes all three. What I see on CNN, a lot of what our politicians tell me is filthy. A lot of what I see in New York City is filthy, but I love it, particularly for that element, so it's a positive.
Again, the interviewer notes that the last album you put out was maybe a bit too low-key, not quite as flashy as he had been used to up until that point.
What is your interviewer dressed like?
What is he dressed like?
You gotta be kidding me.
So you don't think this is a valid perception then, a valid observation?
It sounds like somebody who wears leather things on their wrists and a shag haircut on a 40-year-old. No, it doesn't sound realistic. Wasn't as flashy. Oh, be realistic.
Refresh my memory. What was the one before this one? What was the name of the album?
Oh Christ, I don't know.
Okay. But it wasn't as low key.
Is this public sector press? Is this like for a newspaper, or is this a specialized rock?
This is a music magazine, the best-selling music magazine in Japan.
What's the name of it?
Rocking On.
Rocking On.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So the last one wasn't quite flashy enough as to what he was used to, and well,
he was wondering if this latest album isn't the result of maybe you're sort of changing your direction, getting back to your original roots, getting back to what people recognize as Diamond Dave Lee Roth.
I think he's dreaming. I think this record is completely different than what I've been doing for a number of years. I think that this is more of a hybrid, and it is a vision of something that is more peculiar than ever. It's a combination of different musical styles. It's a blues rock is the heart of the music, but I think it's way more adventurous than anything I've done in years.
I think that's what he was getting at. That it covers a broader spectrum than before. He was noting that the one before this was a little bit more low key. It was more the one before this was a little more bluesy, whereas this one covers more ground.
I think the last album was more unidimensional. It was more rock. It was unaffected. It was not as adventurous as what I'm attempting now. What I'm attempting now is adventurous purely in the sense that I don't know that it's terribly more adventurous. I think it's just simply in a different vein.
Yeah.
I hear a variety of different kinds of music coming from the fire escapes in the city, whether it's dance hall, reggae, or a tropical influence, and certainly more pronounced in New York City than anywhere I've lived before. And as I question it now, I think that it's certainly more pronounced on the new album. A number of the influences are a lot more easy to trace on this album. But I don't think it's terribly adventurous in lieu of what was happening in the 70s and early 80s. It's only within the last 7-8 years that the idea of product management has really entered into the picture. The idea of having to write the same song again and again and again. Of course, this is probably the largest part of the reason that rock music is dying. United States, 20% of the radio stations have gone out of business in the last 3 years alone. Print media, magazines, newspapers regarding music can't go out of business fast enough. And the reason for it is overly specific, is the audience just passed them up. The idea of one human being who listens to only one kind of music again and again is a retro notion. It's backwards. It's dangerous.
Do you think you've been changing as much as say, the fans did?
I think I've probably changed faster than most of the fans. I'm fortunate enough that I don't have to check in my pocket when I go to a music store, and I listen indiscriminately. I buy music by weight instead of by issue and edition. I buy by the kilo. And I listen to everything from Cuban music to dance groove to hard rock, blues, country, western. Most people will tell you this, but they don't really mean it. I really listen across the board, full spectrum. And though the heart of my music is some kind of blues rock, then that is only the beginning of it. And I didn't draw this map. I take my cues from this Rolling Stones and the Beatles and the Aretha Franklins. People always mixed a little outside influence with their main driving wheels. Stones always threw in a little Caribbean influence, or a little reggae, a little country western, or classic, what have you. I don't even think I'm as free-ranging as many of those acts in the 70s and early 80s, and it's certainly telling upon our world cultures today that we consider so very unusual what was standard operating procedure a handful of years ago.
You mentioned New York a couple of times. Do you think that living there has changed you much?
New York is... What you see in New York is what you see in every major city around the world, or will in a short period of time. It's a microcosm. And just as any condensed city in this day and age, it's much more high anxiety, it's much more competitive, it's much more cynical, more disbelieving, and I find that very, very inspiring. I think that whatever talents you may have, an atmosphere like that will either maximize it or force you out of business.
You weren't always located there. What brought you to New York?
Los Angeles has come to represent something rather morbid about music, and that is the idea that if it's popular, it must be good. That if it's very successful, it must be great work. And I don't believe that. If you're telling me that, you're telling me that McDonald's is better for me than sushi because it's more popular. I can't apply that to my music, although many people do. And we also have a situation that's particular to Los Angeles, but affects the rest of the United States and henceforth the rest of the world, in that we've created the notion that a computer readout, that a survey or a telephone poll will tell you who your audience really is, when in fact most people simply vote according to the way they think you want them to vote, as opposed to personal choice. Most human beings, if you tell them you can be anything that you want, you can be like anybody that you want, how do you want to be? Most people will point to the person next to them and say, I want to be just like them. And when you have large groups of people voting on art, it becomes art by committee, and I think you get the very worst of anything.
So you feel that if you had stayed in L.A., you would have started to stagnate?
I think so. I think the overall arts and entertainment field in Los Angeles is stagnant and has been for a number of years. But I think it's worse than ever. The notion that the computer knows everything is ruining music, drama, theater, literature, at least in the United States.
There's a question here about the persona, Crazy Diamond Dave, it says here. Is that something? Well, first of all, did that really exist? Was there a separate?
It existed in the '80s. I was a reflection of the times around me. At any particular given time, I'm a reflection of the times that are around me because I allow myself to change, whereas most artists don't. Well, most artists create a cartoon character for you, and is the same character 10 years later as the very first day that they began. The Ozzy Osbourne approach to theater. I am not the person that I was in 1984, and in 84 I was certainly not the same person that's made that first record in 78, and on and on. 1980s, before Reaganomics destroyed the economy and created the welfare state, we had some expendable cash, and we could afford the gasoline to put in big cars, so we drove big cars to big shows and bought big T-shirts. 1994 is not that. I personally, just as a human being, am not interested in that. It's a different time, a different place.
So you're saying the times now are a lot more sober, a lot more, maybe more even grim than they were back then?
No, I wouldn't say sober. I wouldn't say grim. You said that. I'd say that I'm looking for the real musicality, the real substance in this day and age, because I'm tired of people hiding behind distraction, props, and theatrics in order to disguise mediocre music. I don't even mean smoke bombs or strobe lights. I mean audience dependency, whereby if you have the same haircut and the same shoes and speak the same slang as a given audience, frequently that audience is prepared to accept less than a stellar musical performance. I'm not. I use the same approach when I go to see an artist live, or when I see somebody on the TV. I use the same approach as I do when I go on a date with a woman for the first time. I ask myself, would I still be here if I was blind? And if you ask yourself that question and really answer legitimately, half the time, you're going to have more time on your hands, because no, you wouldn't be there if you were blind.
What about the fan who wants to come see your show? He wants to see Crazy Diamond Dave. What do you have to say to him?
Well, I expect he's just going to have to take his Motorhead T-shirt and Judas Priest headband and march himself over to the Motley Crue show.
What can we expect from your live show now? Is it just all? Is it stripped of all superfluous?
No, the best stuff, the history, comes from the blank stage. It comes from your imagination. If you start to provide too much distraction, then you're no longer involved with using your imagination. It becomes a cartoon for children. And I never pictured myself as making music for children. I know that often my music is best understood by animals and small children, but Jimi Hendrix never aimed his music as children. We may have loved him as kids, but we love him for different reasons as we grow up. It's the same for any pop music, or classic or otherwise.
I think that most people are just going to assume you're the same, flamboyant Dave of old, though. I mean, have you really changed that much?
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see, huh?
How about
I'm not interested in being the same guy that I was in 1985. And I know that many people are very used to that trend in music business. But I don't follow trends. I don't follow any particular music pattern. I have a signature sound, for better or worse. Well, the kind of music I make is Dave. Same as, what do you call what Katie Lang does for a living? You know, what kind of music does Lenny Kravitz make? It's a hybrid. It's a combination of different sounds, and it's not a simple category. And it is ever-changing. When I started off making music, making records in the late 70s, the rock establishment just couldn't understand why Van Halen was doing a cover tune, Jesus, a Kinks song, and then on the other side was a song like Jamie's Crying, that sounded like pop, and then there was a traditional blues, Ice Cream Man. Oh, we were heretics. We ran so against the grain. The rock press did not accept us, not at all. And everybody told us, don't get your hopes up, because punk rock is what it's all about today. Well, years later, X amount of record sales later, everybody was still having a nervous breakdown when we showed up with a song like Jump. Oh, my God, a keyboard as a part of a rock song. Oh, this isn't rock, this isn't correct, this isn't right. And It is constant. I found the only time I'm really fulfilled as an artist is in my most extreme moments.
What have you been doing recently? Why don't you tell us about that?
Been living in New York City. I cut my hair and moved to New York 2 years ago. And no mountain adventures, no jungle, no deep water adventures. These were things that I had been waiting to do since I was a kid, things I had read about in National Geographic. But at this point, the inner city is where all the anxiety and the tension and the stress is coming from, and that's where I want to be.
What exactly have you been doing with yourself, though? Let's say late last year and this year?
Like I said, I've been recording for the last 18 months, on and off. It took a while to write the songs. And no, I didn't write more songs than we actually recorded, but as opposed to sitting down and writing the lyrics for a song in 30 minutes, most of these songs took weeks and weeks as an approach. Things that you would never accept in a novel or even a Batman comic pass for great art in pop music. That's simply because most people in pop music sit down and try and write their songs in the space of a few hours. Can't write great work in a few hours.
Let's get back to the actual recording session, though. When you first started out with Nile, did things work out okay, or was there any friction? How was the chemistry?
Chemistry was beautiful. You only arrive at friction if the artist doesn't have a comprehensive vision of what it is about, what he sounds like, or who he is, or where you're going. People who make the most noise squealing are usually the ones who are most frightened. With Nile, it's more a situation of having a great coach. No matter how great you are, you can do 10% better if you have somebody who has the overall picture in their mind. Particularly if you're performing in the studio, if you're singing or playing, you're not viewing the overall picture. You're pursuing that one frame of thought. And it's great to have somebody who comes from the same mutual musical references. Most producers do not. They're specialists. They either specialize in white rock or black dance or tropical music. Nile is not only interested in, but has produced all of those types of music, all of those types of artists. And since I'm a product of those musical references, it made it a very fluid and a very easy and enjoyable process.
Does he actually try to tinker with the songs, or do you put your foot down there? How exactly does that work?
There's not a lot of tinkering with the songs. Most of the songs were completely written, the vocals, even the guitar solos, long before we stepped through the studio door. When you do that, then what you are achieving in the studio is an act of emotional content more than fighting from syllable to syllable or struggling from one chord change to the next because you're not sure of the map. There was no band to rehearse, but it was myself and Nile who arrived at the orchestrations of the tunes. And when we brought in a rhythm section, a keyboard player, what have you, it was pretty quick recording.
How about live shows? When exactly does your tour start?
Tour starts in a couple of weeks, and we're going to begin the whole Real World tour in Japan. If you perform in a place where English is not the primary language and where people have a respect for that which is subtle as well as that which is colorful and bombastic, then you're prepared to play anywhere else in the world. There are a number of artists today who are entirely dependent upon their cultural link with the audience, that we both speak the same slang, that we both have the same exact cultural references. Well, this works beautifully if you have an American singing to Americans, but what if you have an American who's traveling to Indonesia? That's the test. If you can play in Japan and make it work, then you can play anywhere in the world.
Obviously, we're somewhat biased here because we have access, most of all, to the artists who come out here first of all. But it seems like a lot of people do start their tours in Japan these days. What is that just a coincidence, or?
Oh, I don't know that they're starting for the same reasons that I do.
Mm-hmm.
I perceive of it as one of the most critical audiences in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Probably second only in cynicism, generally being dubious, disbelieving, and sarcastic to New Yorkers.
But in the past, you've always had very good success here, right? I guess the Japanese audience sort of inspires you in that sense to
certainly
better.
Certainly, I see all of this as a very positive thing.
Mm-hmm. We talked about the changing persona. Obviously, you've remained an artist through all this. But going back to, say, your youth, do you think you're the same now as you were when you were, say, a teenager before you found music and fame and all that?
I think I've changed completely. I'm not even the person I was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think my general enthusiasms are much the same, but for different reasons. When you're starting off to make music, make records, you're calling attention to yourself more than anything else. You're demanding attention to what your message is as an artist, or the music that you're playing, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously, I already have that attention at this point. And my furies and ambitions and enthusiasms come from a different place,
mm-hmm.
but certainly no less.
Mm-hmm. I forgot, where did you come from? Like, where were you? Where was your family living before you went to L.A.?
I was born in Bloomington, Indiana. Lived up and down the East Coast in Massachusetts, New York, till I was 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved to Los Angeles.
Oh, I see. But, I mean, do you always do you ever think of Los Angeles as the home you're going to go back to someday? Do you have like a place you consider a home?
In New York, I will always be gaijin. I'll never be somebody who fits in directly to New York. And in Los Angeles, people have always thought my sense of humor and my drive was way too cynical and sarcastic, and that I should move to New York. I don't know that I fit into any one particular place at this point. And from the very edge of New York, in my little apartment, if you stand on a clear day, you can look just right over the ocean and see Paris. Looks interesting to me. Maybe that's next.
So you're one of those Groucho Marx kind of guys who actually...
No, I'm not a Groucho Marx kind of guy at all.
Really? You seem like the kind of guy who prefers to be the outsider, who doesn't really want to be any place where he's fully accepted.
No, I don't work by device like that.
Uh-huh. How about it's sales-wise, it says here. The question about the last one not doing maybe as well as had been expected. Is that much of a source of anxiety, the commerciality of your efforts?
Oh, it was nowhere near as bad as 1980, 81. I remember in Van Halen, we traveled for 10.5 months, and the album didn't even go gold in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So it's ups and downs. Last time out, didn't do so well. That couldn't have possibly been because we released our record 10 days after we went to war, could it? Nah, I'm not going to rationalize that. Mm-hmm. But all over Europe, I did better than ever before. And you know what? It's all ups and downs. Mm-hmm. Ups and downs. And if it's not, then it's because you're not taking enough risks.
Hmm. So you're taking it all pretty philosophically. How about this latest one? When is the release date?
Another week or so.
Mm-hmm. Do you have the full support of the record company, or have you had to struggle with them, or what exactly is the outlook?
Well, originally, I was told to expect maybe some 30 or 40 radio stations across the United States to pick up on this first single in the United States. In the first week, I think we came in at 143. Beats me. How do you rate that?
Well, I guess you're a seasoned pro when it comes to that end of the business. I mean,
What do you mean pro? I don't talk to anybody at radio stations. I don't hustle business people.
Uh-huh.
Put my music out, and people go for it or they don't.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, most radio today works completely off of telephone polls, surveys, and computer readouts.
Mm-hmm.
It's not somebody's just deciding on his own, I like this song. That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, then we'd have some genuine vision of the future musically. No, this is all as per public decision. I don't even have a video on MTV right now.
So you think of it as like a roulette wheel? You're just sort of hoping the right...
No, it's down to musical quality. And it's only when you don't have genuine music that it's a roulette wheel for you.
But you talked about how like the whole thing seems to boil down to mass marketing and...
I didn't say that.
You said like about 6 or 7 years ago that the music industry sort of deteriorated to that stage, and you also were talking about the stuff being good in the 70s and until the mid-80s. But
well, what's your question?
So you don't think that it's more of a matter of chance now than it used to be?
No, I think it's down to the people. I think people vote en masse. By and large, you're going to get the very worst out of everything. But on the other hand, to put out a song like I just did without a video and without buying favors or currying favors at radio stations, well, you have the real taste of the public. Nothing else.
What do you think of the top rock bands of today, like the Pearl Jams or the gangster rappers? They're in the position that Van Halen was in the early and mid '80s. What do you think about that?
Gangster rappers are?
Well, yeah, I mean they're they put out an album that goes straight to #1. Well, some of them.
Like who? Like who?
Well, for example, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg.
How much? I don't understand. Mid '80s, a Van Halen album like 1984 sold 12 million records. How much does Dr. Dre sell? One?
I don't know, but it's just sort of.
I do. Like one?
What's that?
Like 1.5, maybe. I don't see the comparison.
Well, just in terms of like the position, though, they seem to be sort of on top of things right now.
No, I don't think so.
Really?
I don't think 12 million is the same as 1.5 million. Who else were you referring to?
Oh, like Pearl Jam.
Oh, okay.
What do you think of guys like them now? They seem to be in the same position you were.
What position was that?
Of being, the most popular band at the time. The band people are talking about, the band everybody wants to see live. Is it an envious position to be in, or do you think that it's going to be tough for them down the road? Are they making the right moves now?
I have no idea. I don't think you can really judge a talent until it's way down the line. I think it's the second Pearl Jam album. I don't think you can really fully judge a talent. I don't even think you can begin to. The average lifespan of most rock bands or most rock artists is 3 to 6 years, and then they're gone. I don't think we can really judge until 6 years or so have passed.
Does the Van Halen back catalog sell briskly still?
Yeah.
Do you think of that as, say, vindication? Is that the ultimate yardstick for success? That sort of lasting power?
I think it's probably one yardstick for success, but I would prefer to think that what we did with music then is freeze a moment in time. Think of me as more of a photographer. I freeze moments and frequently don't even elaborate upon them. And if you look at it in the eyes of current times, if you look at it in the context of 1994, a great deal of it does not apply any more than Andy Warhol's soup can applies as great art or a great cultural contribution in 1994. But taken in the context of when it was created, when that soup can was popular, makes quite a statement about who we were and where we were at as a culture at that time. And I think Van Halen's music is probably significant of that more than anything else.
And, Dave, when you come to think of it, though, even if, you guys had, it's kind of a morbid way of putting it, but, died in a plane crash in 1984, your catalog by that time was already classic. I mean, and as an individual now, you really don't have to work anymore. I mean, you could basically rely on that back catalog to get you through the rest of your life quite comfortably, I think. What keeps you going? Why continue to pursue it now?
My enthusiasm for music, my enthusiasm for people in general, my enthusiasm for all the little tiny details of culture. Things as simple as travel and all the little dances that we do for each other. There's just not enough time in the day for me to participate in all of the arts and sciences that are available to us.
Do you ever think about what happens when sort of it all ends, when people don't want to pay money to see you or pay money for your records anymore? Do you ever consider what you're going to do after that?
People have been telling me to start worrying about that since 1977.
I guess it's not exactly a piece of advice you care to think about much, huh?
Well, you know, the last thing that any of us will hear when the world blows up into tiny little pieces is the voice of an expert going, "You can't do that."
Okay. That's a good note to end this interview on.
You got everything? That's all your questions?
That's pretty much it. Sorry if there were a couple of clunkers in there that sort of...
No, it's not a problem. Are you translating this?
Yeah. What I do is I translate the basic list and sort of try to add on it as I see fit, although sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think we got a couple of pages worth here.
Great. Good luck to you.
All right, Dave. Well, I hope to see you when you get out here.
Absolutely, man. Thank you very much.
Once again, this has been for Rocking On Magazine, and I'm Steve Harris.
Steve, God bless. Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Civilization who can handle artists ranging from Stevie Ray Vaughan to David Bowie and every character in between. I think it's only peculiar if you see us living in the age of specialization and you only listen to one particular kind of music, but I don't believe that anybody does. And I think the idea of a rock producer to produce rock for exclusively rock music fans, I think is dangerous and a thing of the past.
How about in the past for your solo stuff? What hiatus, let's say, in between this one and the last one?
No, I started to make this record probably 18 months before it came out. Not very long by most standards.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 90 days total in the studio.
Mm-hmm. So pretty much average then.
Uh-huh.
Pretty much average.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the amount of time.
Yes.
Yeah. How about the total of 3 years though? Why was there that long a hiatus?
Well, I was on the road for the better part of a year. That leaves 18 months to go in and out of studio, write your music, put it together is not unusual. What did I do with the extra 3-4 months?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember.
Okay. The interviewer notes here that there's quite a bit of sort of a classic David Lee Roth style. The title, Your Filthy Little Mouth, the names of the songs like She's My Machine. You don't think you've changed very much in the last few years?
Well, I don't know. What was your question?
Have you changed very much, do you think? People are there's a common perception that you've been away for a while. Is it the same old Dave, or do you think you've changed much?
Well, I think there's a certain perception of unidimensional losers who look for something, much as the same people who look for Jesus in an oak tree. If you look hard enough, you'll find whatever it is you're looking for. I think that people have a flat cartoon image of the world around them. Will think in terms of, ooh, there's a sexual entendre. Ooh, there's one of those double meanings I read about when I was in 3rd grade.
Which producers did you use?
Bob Rock. Yeah, that's it, man.
That's it. Oh, okay. But he's the classic example of a guy that does just rock and roll, right?
Yep.
And how did Nile compare with him?
It's 2 different worlds, man.
Maybe you could elaborate a little bit.
I think it's apples and pears. I don't think you can compare the two.
Mm-hmm. But like, what were say the differences? How did?
Yeah, is this question on your paper?
Yeah. This guy wants to know like how Nile was different from the previous.
Like I said, it's apples and pears. You can't compare the two.
I guess it took 3 years to get this record out. It said there was a 3-year. I've been given a list of questions here from Rocking On Magazine, which I shall, I guess, translate for you. My name is Steve Harris, and how much time do we have?
30 minutes.
30 minutes? Okay, sounds good to me. Okay, so are you okay then? You all set?
Sure.
All right. This album, the latest album, is produced by Nile Rodgers, which seems to the interviewer to be a rather strange event. How'd that come about?
Are you on tape recorder?
Sure am.
Nile Rodgers is not particularly unique to himself, an indication of where production of popular music is going to be in the future. There are very few producers in this day of special